The siren screamed through the dusk, slicing the Chicago air like a knife. My vision blurred, the world tilting as I lay sprawled on the asphalt, my bike a mangled heap beside me. Then his face appeared, sharp jaw, steady brown eyes, a paramedic who looked like he'd seen too much but still cared too deeply. I was 24, a graphic designer with dreams bigger than my bank account, pedaling home from a late shift when a car swerved into my lane. The impact sent me flying, my body a ragdoll against the pavement. Pain seared through my leg, my ribs, my skull. I thought I was dying, the city lights fading into a haze. But then he was there, kneeling beside me, his voice a low, calm anchor. Stay with me. All right. You're gonna be fine. His name tag read Evan. He moved with precision, checking my vitals, his hands steady but gentle. The ambulance doors swung open, and I was lifted onto a stretcher, the world spinning again. Evan climbed in beside me, his focus unwavering as the vehicle lurched forward. I caught glimpses of him, dark hair damp with sweat, a faint scar above his eyebrow, the kind of face you'd trust in a crisis. But it was his eyes that held me, warm and intense, like he saw me, not just my injuries. In the ambulance, something happened that I couldn't explain. As he worked, stabilizing my leg, his fingers brushed my hand, lingering a fraction too long. My breath caught, not from pain, but from the jolt of connection, electric and raw. Then he leaned close, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm not supposed to do this," he said, "but I need you to know you're not alone." He slipped a folded piece of paper into my palm, his touch deliberate, secretive. My heart pounded, confusion mixing with the fog of painkillers. I didn't understand it then, but that moment would change everything. The paper burned in my hand as the ambulance raced toward the hospital. I was Ethan, a guy who'd always played it safe, kept my heart locked tight. I'd grown up in a small Illinois town where being openly gay was a risk I never took. Chicago was supposed to be my fresh start, but I'd still kept my walls up, dating apps deleted, my life a cycle of work and solitude. Yet here was Evan, a stranger who'd seen me at my most broken and still looked at me like I was whole. At the hospital, they wheeled me away for x-rays, stitches, and a diagnosis: fractured tibia, cracked ribs, concussion. Evan disappeared into the chaos of the ER, his job done. I clutched the paper he'd given me, 2 days to open it. Hours later, alone in my hospital bed, I unfolded it. A phone number, scrawled in messy ink, with a single line: "You're stronger than you think. Call me." My pulse raced. Why would he do this? Paramedics didn't slip their numbers to patients. It was reckless, unprofessional. Yet the gesture felt like a lifeline, pulling me from the wreckage of that night. I stared at the note, my thumb tracing the ink, wondering who this man was and why he'd risked so much for a stranger like me. The next day, discharged with crutches and a bottle of painkillers, I sat in my tiny apartment, the city humming outside. My leg throbbed, my head ached, but my thoughts kept circling back to Evan. Those eyes, that touch, that note. I should have tossed it. Logic screamed it was a bad idea. But my heart, bruised as it was, had other plans. I dialed his number, my hand shaking, not knowing if I was chasing hope or heartbreak. The call went to voicemail, his voice warm but clipped, professional. "This is Evan. Leave a message." I froze, words tangling in my throat. What was I even doing? I hung up, cursing myself. But 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed a text from an unknown number. "Hey, it's Evan. Glad you're okay. You free to talk?" My stomach flipped. I typed back, "Yeah, just got home. Thanks for everything." We texted for hours that night, cautious at first, then unguarded. Evan was 26, a paramedic for 3 years, born and raised in Chicago's South Side. He loved jazz, hated mornings, and had a dog named Miles. I told him about my art, my small-town roots, the way I'd always felt like I was hiding a piece of myself. It was easy, too easy, to spill my truths to him. By midnight, we'd made plans to meet for coffee when I was steadier on my feet. Days passed, my body healing slower than my curiosity about him. We kept texting, each message a thread weaving us closer. He sent me a photo of Miles, a scruffy mutt with soulful eyes, and I sent him a sketch I'd done of the ambulance, his silhouette in the doorway. "You're talented," he replied. "Wish I could draw the way I see you." My face flushed, and I wondered if he meant it the way I hoped. Our coffee date came a week later, at a cozy shop in Wicker Park. I hobbled in on crutches, nerves jangling. Evan was already there, in jeans and a gray hoodie, looking less like a hero and more like someone I could really know. He smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "You look better than you did on the pavement," he teased, pulling out a chair for me. We talked for hours, the conversation flowing like we'd known each other for years. He told me about the adrenaline of his job, the lives he'd saved, the ones he couldn't. I opened up about my fear of being seen, of loving someone in a world that didn't always make it easy. When our hands brushed across the table, neither of us pulled away. It was a small thing, but it felt seismic. That night, he walked me home, my crutches clicking on the sidewalk. At my door, he hesitated, his eyes searching mine. "I shouldn't have given you my number," he admitted, voice low. "It's against the rules. But I saw you, Ethan, and I couldn't just walk away." My heart thudded. I wanted to kiss him, to close the gap between us, but fear held me back. Instead, I squeezed his hand and said, "I'm glad you didn't." The weeks that followed were a blur of texts, calls, and stolen moments. Evan's shifts were brutal 12 hours of emergencies, lives hanging in the balance, but he always found time to check on me. A quick message during a break, a call at 2 a.m. when he couldn't sleep. I was falling for him, hard and fast, like the crash that had brought us together. My recovery was slow, the cast on my leg a constant reminder of that night. But Evan made it bearable. He'd show up at my apartment with takeout, sprawled on my couch with Miles at his feet, telling stories that made me laugh until my ribs ached. He had a way of making the world feel lighter, even when it wasn't. Yet there was a shadow in his eyes sometimes, a weight he didn't talk about. I sensed it in the way he'd go quiet, staring out my window at the city lights. One evening, as we sat on my fire escape, the Chicago skyline glittering below, he told me about his past. "I came out when I was 19, he said, his voice soft but steady. "My dad didn't take it well. Kicked me out. I lived in my car for a month before I got back on my feet." My chest tightened. I knew that kind of rejection, the way it carved out pieces of you. I told him about my own family, how I'd left my hometown to escape the whispers, the judgment. We were two survivors, finding each other in the wreckage. Our first kiss happened that night, under a sky bruised with clouds. It was tentative at first, then urgent, like we were making up for lost time. His lips were warm, his hands steady on my face, and for the first time, I felt like I could breathe without hiding. But even in that moment, I sensed a hesitation in him, a wall he hadn't let down. The next day, I got a call from my sister, Claire, back in Illinois. She was the only one in my family who'd ever accepted me. No questions asked. "You sound different," she said, her voice teasing. "Is it a guy?" I laughed, caught off guard, and told her about Evan. Her excitement was infectious, but she warned me to take it slow. You've been through a lot, Ethan. Don't rush. I tried to heed her advice, but Evan was a current pulling me under. We went on more dates, art galleries, jazz clubs, quiet walks along Lake Michigan. Each moment felt like a gift, but the shadow in his eyes grew heavier. One night, over dinner at a dimly lit Italian place, he admitted why. My job, it's not just saving people. Sometimes I lose them, and it stays with me. He told me about a call from weeks ago, a kid who didn't make it, how he'd replayed it in his head ever since. I reached for his hand, wishing I could carry some of that weight for him. Our relationship deepened, but so did the challenges. Evan's schedule was unpredictable, his nights often swallowed by emergencies. I'd lie awake, worrying when he didn't text back, imagining him in danger. My own fears crept in too. Could I trust this? Could I trust him? I'd spent so long guarding my heart, and now it was wide open, vulnerable in a way that terrified me. One night, he showed up at my door unannounced, his uniform rumpled, eyes red. Rough shift, was all he said before collapsing onto my couch. I sat beside him, letting him lean into me, his breathing uneven. I don't know how to do this, he murmured. Be with someone. Not when I'm carrying all this. My heart sank, but I held him tighter, determined to prove he didn't have to carry it alone. The weeks turned into months, and Evan became a constant in my life. My cast came off, replaced by a limp I was working to lose. Physical therapy was grueling, but Evan was there, cheering me on, even when I wanted to give up. He'd bring coffee to my sessions, sit in the waiting room with a book, his presence a quiet reassurance. But the cracks in our relationship started to show. His shifts grew longer, the calls more intense. He'd come over exhausted, his stories darker: a car crash, a heart attack, a domestic call that left him shaken. I tried to be his anchor, but I was struggling too. My art commissions had dried up, my savings dwindling. The stress of recovery, bills, and uncertainty made me short-tempered, and we started to argue. One night, it came to a head. We were at his place, a small apartment cluttered with vinyl records and dog toys. I'd had a bad day, another rejection from a client, and snapped when he forgot to text me after a shift. I need to know you're okay, Evan, I said, my voice sharper than I meant. You can't just disappear. He looked at me, exhaustion etched into his face. I'm doing my best, Ethan. This job, it takes everything. The fight escalated, words flying like shrapnel. I accused him of shutting me out. He said I didn't understand the pressure he was under. It ended with him storming out, leaving me alone in his apartment with Miles staring at me, confused. I went home, my chest tight with regret. Had I pushed him too far? Was this the end? The next morning, he called, his voice soft. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have walked out. Can we talk? Relief flooded me, but so did doubt. We met at a park, the air crisp with autumn. He looked worn, but his eyes were clear. I care about you, Ethan, more than I've ever cared about anyone. But this job, it's who I am. And sometimes, it's too much. I nodded, my throat tight. I don't want to lose you, I said. But I need you to let me in. We made a pact that day to communicate, to be honest, even when it hurt. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. We spent the afternoon walking, hand in hand, the city alive around us. For the first time, I felt like we could make it, if we fought for it. But life had other plans. A week later, Evan got a call during dinner: a mass casualty incident, a pileup on the highway. He left in a rush, promising to call later. Hours passed. Then a day. No word. My texts went unanswered. My calls to voicemail. Panic set in. Was he hurt? Had something happened? I called his station, but they could only tell me he was on duty. The waiting was agony, each hour stretching my nerves thinner. When he finally called, his voice was hollow. It was bad. Ethan. Really bad. He didn't elaborate, and I didn't push. When he came over that night, he was a ghost of himself, his hands trembling as he held me. I don't know if I can keep doing this, he whispered. My heart froze. Was he talking about his Job or us? I held Evan that night, his body heavy against mine, as if the weight of the world had settled into his bones. He didn't talk about the call, and I didn't ask. Instead, I traced circles on his back, hoping my touch could say what words couldn't. But the fear lingered, was he slipping away? Not just from me, but from himself. The next morning, he was quieter than usual, sipping coffee at my kitchen table. I'm thinking of taking a break, he said finally. From work. Maybe from everything. My stomach dropped. I wanted to support him, but the idea of him pulling away terrified me. What does that mean for us? I asked, my voice barely steady. He looked at me, his eyes soft but guarded. I don't know yet. I just need time. Time. The word hung between us, heavy with uncertainty. I nodded, swallowing my fear, and we went about our day, pretending everything was fine. But it wasn't. Evan started pulling back, his texts less frequent, his visits shorter. I threw myself into my art, sketching late into the night, trying to drown out the worry. My latest piece was a portrait of him, his face half lit by ambulance lights, a mix of strength and vulnerability. It was my best work, but it felt like a goodbye. A month later, he told me he'd taken a leave of absence. I need to figure out who I am without the job, he said. We were at a diner, the kind with sticky tables and neon signs. It's been my whole life for so long. I understood, but it hurt. His job had brought us together, but it was also tearing us apart. I reached for his hand, desperate to hold on. I'm here, Evan. Whatever you need. He squeezed my hand, but his smile was strained. You're too good for me, Ethan. The words cut deeper than they should have. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was enough, but doubt gnawed at me. Was I enough for him? Could I be, when his world was so much bigger, so much heavier? We tried to keep things normal. Dates, movie nights, walks with Miles. But the distance grew, subtle but undeniable. He'd stare off mid-conversation, lost in thoughts he didn't share. I started to wonder if I was losing him not to another person, but to the ghosts he carried. I'd catch him looking at me sometimes, like he was memorizing my face, and it scared me more than anything. One night, he showed up at my apartment, rain-soaked and unsteady. I need to tell you something, he said, his voice raw. My heart stopped. Was this it? The end? He sat on my couch, head in his hands. That night, in the ambulance, I wasn't supposed to give you my number. But it wasn't just a whim. I felt something, Ethan. Something I hadn't felt in years. And it scared the hell out of me. I sat beside him, my pulse racing. Why are you telling me this now? He looked up, his eyes glistening. Because I'm falling for you. And I'm terrified I'll ruin it. The confession hit me like a wave, relief and fear crashing together. I kissed him, hard, pouring everything into it, me hope, my fear, my love. For a moment, it felt like we could outrun the darkness. Evan's confession changed things, but not in the way I'd hoped. It was like opening a door only to find another locked one behind it. He was trying God. He was trying, but the weight of his past, his job, his fears, kept pulling him back. I wanted to be his safe harbor, but I was barely keeping myself afloat. My art started to reflect my turmoil. I painted scenes of ambulances, city streets, Evan's face in shadows. A gallery owner saw my work online and offered me a spot in a group show. It was a lifeline, a chance to rebuild my career, but it meant late nights, missed calls, and less time with Evan. He supported me, showing up to my studio with coffee and quiet encouragement, but I could feel the strain. One evening, as I worked on a canvas, he sat watching me, his expression unreadable. "You're different when you paint," he said. "Like you're somewhere else." I paused, brush in hand. "Maybe I am. It's the only place I feel in control." He nodded, but his silence spoke louder than words. I wondered if he felt the same way about his job, trapped in a role he couldn't escape. The gallery show was a success, my pieces selling faster than I'd expected. For the first time in months, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. Evan was there, proud but distant, clapping as I gave a short speech. Afterward, we walked home together, the city alive with possibility. But when we reached my apartment, he stopped at the door. "I need to tell you something," he said, and my heart sank. Those words again. He'd been offered a job desk role, training new paramedics. It was safer, less draining, but it meant leaving the field, the adrenaline, the chaos that defined him. "I don't know if I can do it," he admitted. "It's all I've ever known." I wanted to scream that he deserved peace, that he didn't have to carry the world. Instead, I said, "Whatever you choose, I'm with you." But the words felt hollow. I wasn't sure if I could keep up with his battles and mine. The next week, he took the job. I thought it would bring us closer, give us time to rebuild. But instead, it seemed to unsettle him more. He was restless, second-guessing himself, snapping at small things. I tried to be patient, but my own fears crept in. Was I enough to keep him grounded? Or was I just another weight pulling him down? One night, we fought again, worse than before. It was about nothing, dishes left in the sink. A missed call, but it felt like everything. "Maybe we're not good for each other," he said, his voice breaking. The words hit like a punch. I stared at him, my vision blurring with tears. "Do you really believe that?" I asked. He didn't answer, just grabbed his jacket and left. The days after our fight were a haze. Evan didn't call, didn't text. I threw myself into my art, painting until my hands cramped, trying to outrun the ache in my chest. My sister called, sensing something was wrong. "You can't fix him, Ethan," she said gently. "You can only love him." But what if love wasn't enough? I saw him a week later, by chance, at a coffee shop. He looked tired, his eyes shadowed, but he smiled when he saw me. We sat, awkward at first, then talked like the fight hadn't happened. "I miss you," he said finally, his voice low. "But I don't know how to do this without hurting you." I wanted to tell him it was okay, that we could figure it out, but the words stuck. Instead, I reached for his hand, hoping it was enough. We started again, slower this time. He was adjusting to his new job, the desk work a stark contrast to the chaos of the field. I was busy with new commissions, my art gaining traction. We carved out time for each other, quiet dinners, late-night talks, moments that felt like us again. But the fragility lingered, a crack that hadn't fully healed. One evening, he invited me to meet his mom, a small step that felt huge. She was warm, welcoming, nothing like the father who'd rejected him. Over dinner, she told stories of Evan as a kid, his stubborn streak, his need to help others. He's always been a fixer, she said, smiling at me. Just don't let him try to fix you. I laughed, but her words stuck with me. Was that what he was doing? Trying to save me, like he saved others. As winter settled over Chicago, our relationship found a rhythm. We celebrated small victory as me first solo gallery show, his first successful training session. But the past wasn't done with us. One night, he got a call from an old colleague, asking him to cover a shift in the field. It's just one night, he said, but I saw the spark in his eyes, the pull of the life he'd left behind. He went, and I waited, the old fears creeping back. When he came home, he was different wired, alive, but haunted. It felt good, he admitted. But it also reminded me why I left. I nodded, unsure what to say. I wanted him to be happy, but I didn't know if that meant losing him to the job again. The pull of Evan's old life grew stronger. He started taking more shifts, just to help out, he said. I saw the change in him, the adrenaline, the purpose, but also the toll. He'd come home exhausted, his stories laced with pain. I tried to be supportive, but the distance between us widened. My art was thriving, but my heart was fraying. One night, he didn't come home. No call, no text. I stayed up, pacing, imagining the worst. At dawn, he showed up, pale and shaken. There was a kid, he said, his voice breaking. We couldn't save him. I held him as he cried, his body trembling against mine. It was the first time I'd seen him break, and it terrified me. Not because he was weak, but because I didn't know how to help him carry it. We talked for hours that morning, raw and honest. He admitted he was struggling, torn between the job he loved and the life he wanted with me. I don't want to lose you, he said, but I don't know how to balance this. I told him I didn't need him to be perfect, just present. But even as I said it, I wondered if that was enough. The turning point came a month later. I got a call from a gallery in New York, offering me a residency. It was a dream, a chance to take my art to the next level, but it meant leaving Chicago for 6 months. I told Evan over dinner, expecting him to be happy for me. Instead, his face fell. You're leaving? He asked, his voice tight. I explained it was temporary, that we could make it work, but he shook his head. I can't do long distance, Ethan. Not with everything else. The words stung, but I saw the truth in his eyes. He was drowning, and I couldn't pull him out. We spent the night apart, the first time in months. I lay awake, replaying our story, the ambulance, the note, the coffee dates, the fights, the love. I wanted to fight for us, but I didn't know if he had the strength to fight with me. The next day, I made a decision. I went to his apartment, my heart in my throat. I'm not taking the residency, I said. I'm staying here. With you. He stared at me, stunned. Ethan, you can't give that up for me. But I shook my head. I'm not giving it up. I'm choosing us. Choosing Evan wasn't the end of our struggles, but it was a beginning. He quit the extra shifts, focusing on his training role, finding a new kind of purpose. I took on local projects, my art flourishing in ways I hadn't expected. We moved in together, a small apartment with a view of the city we'd fought to call home. It wasn't perfect. We still argued, still carried our scars. But we learned to lean on each other, to share the weight. Evan started therapy, working through the trauma of his old job. I opened up about my fears, my past, the walls I'd built. Together, we built something strong, a love that could weather the storms. One evening, a year after the accident, we sat on our balcony, miles curled up between us. The city sparkled below, alive with possibility. Evan took my hand, his grip steady. "I was scared that night," he said, his voice soft. "Not just for you, but for what I felt. I thought I didn't deserve it." I squeezed his hand, my heart full. "You deserve everything," I said. The note he'd given me in the ambulance was framed on our wall, a reminder of the moment that changed us. It wasn't just about the shock of his gesture, but the courage it took for both of us to keep reaching for each other. We'd been broken, lost, afraid, but we'd found our way, not just to love, but to hope. Our story wasn't a fairy tale. It was messy, real, human, but it was ours. And every time I looked at Evan, at the life we were building, I knew I'd call him again, every single day, for as long as he'd let me.